Hello Internet, I'm Firebolt.
I'm the Orbiter.
And welcome to episode 10 of our podcast.
In new, improved, non-wobbly vision.
Yeah, we've got a boom stand now for the camera.
It's been Firebolt proofed.
Fuck you. Oh, and also the Orbiter's finger looks and smells disgusting. You can't smell that, but it's not unlike cow shit.
Keyboard and Keyboard players and pianists, don't bite your nails, because if it gets infected and it blows up like a balloon and it's full of pus, and then you have to go and get it lanced and it all squeezes out and it's really painful.
And I don't know how, but you apparently got it biting your fingernails.
Yeah. It's quite a common thing. Apparently, people can actually lose a finger from it if it's not treated. But I'm on the antibiotics. Fortunately, we're not in America, so I'm on the antibiotics.
Oh, and a second person has asked for merch.
So we're on the case.
Well, at the time of recording, we're looking into it.
Yeah. I have sourced
high probabilities of actually getting it going.
I've sourced a supplier. We just need to get some high enough res versions of our logos.
It may have already been announced on the website, but most people don't pay attention to that.
It depends how much time I get in the next couple of weeks. But
we're going to record two versions. One for it if it has been announced, and one if it hasn't.
I'm not going to get that far ahead on editing that I won't know, am I?
Yeah, but oh well. Anyway, if you do want merch and it is already out, then there will be a link in the description.
Your own Breaking Bollocks t-shirt or baby bib or
mug or towel. Yeah, they genuinely sell baby bigs that you could put Breaking Bollocks,
baby grows,
the whole thing with like the actual bollocks in it.
Yeah, backpacks.
Yeah,
that sort of stuff. So
also,
that's coming
just
soon.
Other logos in general.
Yeah, we should do a boop my snoot one.
Mm-hmm.
And also a wow, that got deep.
Yeah.
So without further ado, shall we get deep?
Mm-hmm. So today's topic is war. We won't sing that song because copyright.
But what is it good for?
I would argue not a fucking lot.
Yeah,
someone in the comments said about talking about conscription. Now, that's a fairly narrow topic just for an entire video, but we are going to talk about that in this video.
I don't like the idea of war, and it's a shame that this is the case, but it is sometimes, it has been referred to as the mother of invention. I don't know if you know this.
No.
If it wasn't for, I think it was the Cold War, we wouldn't necessarily yet have an internet, because it was developed by the Americans as a means of setting up a distributed network that would be impervious to specific location assaults, so they could still get messages from one command center to another without it being centralized so it couldn't be destroyed.
I might argue that if war wasn't a part of human civilization, that far much more could be done.
This is true, but would it? That's the thing.
It's impossible
they throw the money.
know.
They throw the money at the research when it's kind of panic stations, isn't it? Like, shit, we need to develop some
But if
stuff.
that panic station was never there, then you could just have constant progress.
You could, but would you?
Rather than having to build up resources for the next big war, so that you can do that then. You could just sort of have it at a steady stream. There's I can't remember where I saw this, but apparently if the Romans hadn't been defeated in war, although they kind of became what they were because of war, we'll ignore that. If the Romans hadn't been defeated, we would have probably had the internet in the 1700s.
Wow, where would we be now?
Probably in a holodeck.
Possibly.
Maybe we are. Anyway, occasionally I think it is necessary, although often it is fought by politicians that have it and it's usually for like resources,
There's a lot
or
of money in it,
territory,
isn't there?
or for ideologies. It's fought by people that aren't, well, the people that actually wage them and start them.
But it's very often about money and
Yeah.
oil quite
It's like-
often.
And people just die horribly.
I think it's disgusting that Britain is the second biggest arms dealer on the planet,
Yeah.
or arms exporter. I don't think they actually deal directly, but
Oh, and we did say last week that we were going to talk more about Syria, so happy times.
way death and destruction.
Right. With Syria, it's a very obviously complex issue, otherwise it would have been solved by now. It's a difficult situation because in a normal situation you'd have sort of a government oppressing people and rebels. It makes sense to support the rebels because the government oppressing is against our ideology, blah blah blah. And also the rebels might be sympathetic if you're going for a purely cold look at it rather than the actual human rights.
Yeah, oppression. Obviously, in Syria's case, there's a fairly clear-cut case of that. But at what point is it a downward slope, or at what point can you say that the people are being oppressed by the government? I did notice today the local council elections in England. There are people complaining that their civil rights have been abused because
I would like to point out, not today, as in your today, our today.
Because they couldn't prove who they were. So we're
Yeah,
we're
that's
already
ridiculous.
at a case where
This hostile environment bullshit is
This
just
ID
fucking pissing me off.
I mean, when you look back to in Germany back in the early 1900s, they started by making everybody carry around ID cards, didn't they? I know we don't have that at the moment, but these people have had their right to vote, their democratic right to vote,
It's a massive
refused.
barrier to democracy. But yeah, I'm gonna slightly digress. It's not like we ever do that, but my mother, Mrs. Orbiter, for reasons that I won't go into, had to get a PIP assessment. This is for welfare because she can't move very well by her. Well, she can move, but
It's a great deal of pain.
she often requires to be cared for because she's in tremendous amount of pain. She got a
Personal independence payment assessment.
yes, and in every category she scored 0.
Yeah, which was bollocks. I mean, the summary was
Absolute bollocks.
the summary said things like, "You have said that you have difficulty with this, and this. I have decided that you don't have difficulty with this, and this." It's like scored 0. I mean, like
I'm guessing that
when you say you
This
can't
is-
do
I
something
have
essential,
decided.
you can't do something essential 3 or 4 days out of a week, and yet you score 0 out of 8 on that scale. It doesn't seem right. But I don't blame the people doing the assessing because they're obviously under target pressure, and it's probably just a standard thing that they
blame the
always refuse the
Tory
first.
policy
Tories out.
that makes this whole thing. I mean, I get, yeah, you don't want to just be giving out disability benefits to people who are genuinely being fraudulent, but at the same time, you don't want to make it difficult for people that are genuinely having difficulty getting by to have.
But this is the first time I've actually come up against it personally.
Although
I had heard from lots of other people that it is a battle to get disability payments.
Although you get disability benefits currently for me because I'm autistic, and when I was younger, it was
Well, actually, you get them.
well,
We receive them
yeah.
for you
um
on your behalf. You're going to have to
How
go through
kind
that.
of you.
You're going to have to go through that in
yeah
a couple of years.
basically in the past I had a lot of behavioural issues, which meant that one of my parents had to be home pretty much constantly, that being my mum. But in about 2 years I'll be reassessed, and I probably won't get.
So, tying that into our topic,
Especially since it's probably going to be a Tory government at the time.
At what point does a regime become regarded as oppressive to its citizens to the point where an invasion is... I mean, obviously, Syria is way beyond anything that we're having to put up with. This is mild inconvenience by comparison. But
also, the whole idea of revolution. I would say that I'm quite staunchly socialist. I prefer democratic socialism, which is achieving that system through democracy and reform. But there are other forms of socialism that advocate revolution to get this equality. Now, would you say that if you were... how left-leaning would you say that you are?
Whenever I do that political what is it, compass thing, I come out. I mostly identify with Liberal Democrats, but the next closest is Labour, so I'm not extreme left, but
so you're probably on the political compass, probably the same quadrant as
centre left,
closer to the centre.
Yeah.
Marxism, which is one of the revolutionary forms of socialism, but also falling into that communism. Now, if I get any of this terminology wrong, just deal with it.
Yeah, don't use any of what we say as basis for like your PhD or anything, because we're just talking bollocks. Remember?
Yeah. that's
like that was going to happen as well. There's some professor in a university going, "You guys should watch this couple of guys talking bollocks on their podcast because they talk bollocks."
Yeah.
You can get a PhD in talking bollocks.
But what?
Sorry.
So, I believe it is called media studies. Sorry, media studies teachers.
Is that not what reporters all take before they qualify for the profession?
It's what people that want to go to college but don't actually want to do anything with a degree do. This is just observance.
Is it?
Some people might actually use it. I'm sorry to journalists and the likes, but fucking deal with it too.
We're making all the enemies today.
Yeah. Let's make an enemy of the state. But yeah, at what point does a revolution become necessary? Because
there's different kinds of revolution as well.
Almost always messy.
You could argue that we're kind of in a constant gradual state of evolution. We seem to swing from revolution. Sorry, we seem to swing from left to right gradually over the years.
I mean a violent overturn.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Violence.
At what point does that violence become justified to?
I suppose it's not anywhere near a revolution, but
not in Britain.
The nearest thing that we've come to that in recent years has been the riots a few years ago.
Oh right, I thought that was more to do with police brutality.
But that's an element of the population rising up against the authorities, isn't it?
Mm.
They did I think introduce the option of water cannon as a result of that, I think, at the time.
Which is ridiculous. At the point where they're actually smashing up shit, arrest them for smashing up the shit. Yeah, but don't arrest them just for protesting.
It's obviously a case of, a lot of people used it as an excuse to go looting and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's that environment where people are dissatisfied enough with life that can happen and can just boil over.
Those were just idiots that tagged along and pretty much probably ruined the actual cause of the riots.
But you've got that environment there where there's that pressure cooker, if you like, bubbling under, that social kind of unease going on, that it just takes a catalyst to make it kick off.
To be honest, with a lot of the ways that Western society is going, I would say that it's close to a point where, even maybe not revolution, but some serious radical political change is needed. Like in
Well,
America, they have used tear gas to stop protesters, peaceful protesters.
I think it'll come because things over the last decade or so, things have been getting progressively further right wing politically, and I think that pretty much globally, actually, certainly across Europe.
Watching a fair amount of Owen Jones recently.
Hmm.
Do you know who Owen Jones is?
Yes, I do know. Yes,
if you don't know, he's a Guardian journalist.
If you don't know, then you should, because we mentioned him in the last episode. So
did we?
Yeah, we did. There's a link in the description of the last podcast.
What was this?
It was history. I don't know what in relation to, but,
right, okay.
but he did come up.
But yeah, I watched a video recently of his that seemed. Well, I've also been watching a fair amount of videos sort of arguing the pros and cons of socialism and different forms of them. And from what my feeling, I mean, this is slightly going off from war, but revolution as an idea, which is a form of war, kind of civil war, but...
I think from what I remember, it might have been in connection to socialism, actually. Are we pushing a political agenda on our channel?
Oh, it's not like anyone does that.
No.
Oh, we can't have bias. Fuck you, I'm biased as shit and I don't give a fuck. You have your own brain, make up yourself.
This is kind of tying in with our political animals game, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Should we start throwing cash around and see if we get popularity online?
I mean, that's probably not gone out yet, so you shouldn't say that. Yeah.
Possibly. Can't remember.
Right.
Well, it'll only be a slight spoiler if it hasn't.
What was I saying? Yeah, a lot of free reform. It's sort of, I've seen some diagrams of it being sort of, okay, so we get feudalism, and that eventually becomes capitalism, until eventually we reach socialism, and possibly even communism. Now, total communism is where there's actually no need for state, because that equal society is just the norm.
Yeah, I suppose.
I don't know if we'll ever reach that point, but we may reach a sort of.
I think there's probably a lot of people that would be worried about a state of anarchy developing in that case.
Well, it is literally anarchy without government, but anarchy's not always a bad thing.
No, the Sex Pistols didn't think so.
I'm guessing you're referencing a song or just general
anarchy in the UK,
right?
But that was the 70s. There was that whole punk sort of. You can track a lot of this actually in the different ways that art forms react to political situations. The rise of punk in the 70s was very much in line to a rise of unrest at the establishment.
Right. Okay. So it is potentially that system of equality could be achieved over time, but we may want to speed that up.
I actually think music is a far more effective weapon.
Yeah. But yeah, in the case of Syria, a revolution is definitely warranted. I would fully support the rebels. Maybe not through violent acts, but definitely helping on the ground with civilian casualties because of the rebels too, and just general people that aren't actually involved in the conflict. I think I said last week that this was started because some teenagers wrote some anti-government slogans on a wall and were arrested. I don't think they were executed. You might have to look that up yourself.
Sorry, carry on.
And then this erupted into pretty much nationwide protests, and they were quelled violently. And that eventually escalated into a full-on civil war to the situation we have now. But this is complicated further because terrorist groups started moving in. So now this is when the West got involved, because the West don't really give a shit about a humanitarian crisis as long as it doesn't affect them. It's quite a brutal reality, but it is reality.
Well, they can profit from it, can't they?
But they can profit from selling arms.
Yeah.
They don't do much in Yemen, from what I can tell,
No.
because they can sell arms to Saudis. I'm still pissed off about
that. When I was doing some research about that, you saying about Syria and the people helping the civilians on the ground, that last episode I mentioned the White Helmets documentary. I came across an interview with Roger Waters, ex-Pink Floyd, who was slating it on the grounds that he cited it as basically propaganda for Islamist terrorists to kind of justify their cause and invite sympathy for their cause. But that kind of pissed me off. Roger Waters is a weird character for me. He's very influenced by the effects of war. Some of the things he says and does I find to be really annoying, but in other ways he's an absolute genius. I mean, The Wall is all about...
You don't have to agree with every political view of a musician that you like.
No. Well, I mean, the I kind of have to disregard the views of some of the musicians that I have a great deal of respect for, simply so that I can still enjoy the music, because there's so much that's been inspired by religious belief that I don't want to lose that catalogue by by cutting myself off from that. But but yeah, the thing The Wall is about. It's not just about the walls between people in society. It's about inner walls in your mind and just kind of cutting yourself off. Division, I suppose. And they have another album, The Division Bell, don't they? Pink Floyd.
America nowadays is seeming... I mean, a fair amount of Western societies are looking very divided between the left and right.
Well, I think it does them... it helps powers that be, if you like, to keep authority if the population is divided. So in some ways it's good for them to encourage division.
I believe a fair amount of this some of it happens just by itself, but a fair amount of this has been heavily influenced by the Russian government to try and destabilize Western governments so that they can't stop expansion effectively, because they're all bickering amongst themselves.
So what are the Russian government to gain from that? They want to expand, obviously.
Well, say they wanted to invade Ukraine. Now, they might so they might say, oh, well, let's create Brexit. Well, let's help the Leave campaign, because I imagine the Leave campaign already existed.
It's difficult for me.
Which they did help the Leave campaign.
It's difficult for me to think in terms of... Because you've got to think about... You've got this superpower wanting to expand. What does it gain from that expansion? And it's really difficult from a Western viewpoint to view it in anything other than... I mean, it's territorial. But that's really about property, isn't it? Which is a financial thing.
Resources. But then at that point, you just go... Oh,
but that's not really a communist kind of thing, is it?
Russia at the moment is not communist.
No. They tried to be, didn't they?
Well, the USSR was... Well, not communist, socialist. It pretended to be communist.
But Putin's kind of rooted in that, in the USSR kind of ideology.
Well, he was a KGB agent, but that doesn't mean that he's...
I suppose.
He benefits from the Russian oligarchy. He's not communist from anything I've seen. He might wish to reinstate the USSR at some point.
I'm sure I remember seeing that.
That's up to speculation.
There's quite a lot of property in London owned by Russian oligarchs.
Yeah, there's basically... this was also an Owen Jones thing. A video, really. I believe he took what was called the Dirty Money Tour, where kleptocrats, which are kleptocracy, sort of the power of people who steal. So people that steal from their citizens,
Yeah.
from being corrupt, but also just actual criminals.
Yeah.
There's very lax laws on buying property, so they can buy property in the UK and use that as an asset without it actually being tracked.
Right.
So there's loads of flats in London owned by the Russian government just to sort of use as an asset for dirty money.
Cool.
It's not cool. It's fucking corrupt, and we're helping.
I was being ironic. Is any of Britain kind of British anymore? You know, I mean, it's like the royal family's German. Half of London's owned by the Russians. The Americans have got their missiles here.
Well, on the top, we should probably get back to war more. But like, why do we have territory? I don't get it.
Something to fight over, isn't it?
Yeah, humans just seem to like to fight and just categorize themselves into these stupid groups. It's like, oh yes, this must all be British, despite half of it.
Okay, so if you go back in time,
we're kind of mixing.
We're mixing history with war here. If you go back in time to,
like, they're just hunks of rock. You can all.
I mean, originally when it was a fight for survival, obviously we went out hunting for meat and what have you to eat. At some point, there must have been that must have been when things became
competition for food. But nowadays, that's just not necessary.
I don't know.
All it really is now is competing ideologies, which is the only place that war can really happen. But I just don't see why it's sort of like we can have competing ideologies, but we're not going to go to war with each other.
No, but I suppose it's one of these things that once it's started, it's like lighting a fuse, isn't it? You know, it's difficult to extinguish once it's kicked off. So I mean, you can look back in history to the roots of where it all kind of spiraled from.
What we should do is set apart all the people from different. Actually, no, that would cause a mass amount of war. I was going to say I would just put all the fascists in Australia, and then.
But then, is that not a form of political apartheid?
Yeah, so that's not going to work, and it's going to cause massive amounts of war over who gets the most territory.
And the pacifists, what?
Anyway, back to Syria, because we're taking far too long on this.
Conscription.
We're going to talk about
Syria.
Yes, Syria first. I would much prefer a diplomatic solution. I did say last week that people say this has been tried, but then I come back with bombings have already been tried in multiple governments, and they've collapsed.
Yeah, and just because something's been tried doesn't mean you can't try it again. I mean, you know.
Yeah. And a lot of people say about Jeremy Corbyn that he's a terrorist sympathiser for wanting to actually... Not sympathiser.
Digital terrorism.
Blow up Parliament. Don't do that. Shit, what was I talking about?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes. Terrorist sympathiser. No. A lot of people say he's a terrorist sympathiser for wanting to negotiate with the people that are committing these acts, because the people just seem to have a gut reaction to that and not really get that having a sort of we don't negotiate with terrorists attitude. It hasn't solved anything.
I don't understand that at all. That idea.
Like, we don't the Good Friday Agreement only happened because of negotiation.
It's not about.
If you don't know what the Good Friday Agreement is, it was during the Trouble in Northern Ireland, which are kind of sort of
communicate, talk to people.
They made an act which basically meant that the UK government couldn't interfere with Ireland, although Northern Ireland was still British. So it's kind of weird. And recently that came a bit under fire. Well, not recently, like a year ago. But during the general election last year, officially, she's got confidence and supply with the DUP, which is the Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. Which meant that I would call that a breach of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
Because it's interfering in that.
Yeah.
Which is why the main reason why Ireland pretty much has its own political system and
But
no
all
other parties
these-
have seats there is because
all
of
these
that.
things like happen gradually, and it's kind of every time something happens that's not acceptable, it's only a little bit further than the unacceptable thing that happened before, until you've got this situation where you've got further and further right wing and corrupt, and people are just accepting it. It's not good enough.
I quite like Jeremy Corbyn because I think even if some of his policies are a bit off or not very strong, we need a left-wing opposition to actually keep the right in check.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I particularly like him, but I don't need to like politicians.
No,
just
I don't
need
like
to
him. I don't
think
like
that they're
most
good at the
politicians,
job.
but he represents my interests best.
Yeah. The thing about negotiating as well that I was going to say was, why does it have to be about we've tried that, it hasn't worked? It's not a process that ever ends communication. You don't try to reach an agreement with somebody and then stop communicating. Negotiating, talking, communicating is about carrying on doing it. Even if you never reach a solution, just keep talking.
We should probably talk about this too. The Korean War has ended after about 60 years. Oh, and the South Korean president argued that Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Did he?
Yes.
But he wasn't there.
I know. And loads of other people people at his rallies were chanting, Noble, Noble. Like, they can chant anything, to be honest.
Well,
Ridiculous.
it would highly devalue the Nobel Peace Prize.
At that point, you may as well give...
Anyway, we beat him to it.
You may as well give the Nobel Prize for Physics to Joey Essex.
All the citizens of the European Union have won it before him. So we're obviously
I
more
don't know
peaceful.
if we'll have that stripped off of us.
I don't know if they can take it away. I mean, certainly not for changing your membership of a political organisation. I mean, maybe if you did something horrific.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But that does also mean that Nigel Farage has a Nobel Peace Prize.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. But anyway. War. Star Wars.
No.
Okay.
Conscription. We're going to talk about that. Promise you. I just don't get the idea of conscription in any way. I mean, I oppose fighting in general, unless it's in extreme circumstances for revolution.
I'm not sure what happens with
And
conscription.
even then,
if you
it should
conscientiously
be-
object, do you get put in prison?
Not today, but during the First World War, most people were.
Yeah.
And people that the people that weren't were mostly sent to do like I think it was the Friends Ambulance Unit, which instead of actually fighting, just took off wounded soldiers.
Yeah.
But that's still supporting the war effort, and some people objected to any support of the war effort. Also, you could like work in a munitions factory or something, or on the roads. Work of national importance.
But the other side of it is, if the alternative would be to allow your country to be invaded by a hostile force,
Well, the people don't want that, then they can enlist.
True.
They shouldn't be forced to fight for a government that they might not even agree with.
No.
No one's stopping them from signing up. It's against their actual rights to choose.
There are some countries that still have like a year of conscription, aren't there?
France has, I believe, a couple of months of military service.
Yeah.
Which I find fucking... I just don't get it.
Well, they kind of have the essence of it in private schools in Britain. They do the CCF, Combined Cadet Forces, in the senior school. Where you can choose to be like in the RAF or the Navy or the Army or who's the other one?
I just see military as
Delta,
kind of a sort of necessary evil in a way, but I would rather that it be massively stripped down. And you shouldn't be forced to fight for it.
That is happening. Cutbacks everywhere. Military are included in that.
Yeah, but they're being cut back more in other departments than military. It's just not necessary. Like, spend more on diplomats rather than soldiers.
Need. Sorry.
And you might actually get some peace rather than just creating more war and more problems and more terrorist cells to create more war and more problems to create more terrorist cells.
Yeah, but then you lose money. If you're a capitalist who's making money out of arms sales...
I'm not a capitalist that's making money out of arms sales.
Yeah, but you got to try and sell it, your argument, to people who are.
Right.
Convince these people that money is the only important thing, that they can make more money out of peace than war.
Arms dealers, have you ever thought about the tofu business? There's more tofu in peace than arms.
What?
I'm making a joke.
There's more tofu in peace than arms?
That one, no.
I'm confused now.
No, you know what you should invest in, arms dealers? Hummus. That's going places. You just go to wherever you're going. This is.
I don't know why, but that made me
hummus.
think of Sausage Party.
Okay.
Which is an excellent film. Go watch it.
It's a bit vulgar.
A bit. It's ace, though. Totally politically incorrect, but justifiably so.
I think politically correct is only for politicians, to be honest. Otherwise, it's just called not being a dick.
That's not going to happen to us, is it?
And if you
The Breaking Bollocks Party. Actually, that just sounds like a really painful night out. With a crowd of feminists. Yeah, war.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, Mrs. Orbiter's brandishing her knuckles. I'm worried.
So am I.
Right, so, yeah, what else do we have to discuss with war? War of the Worlds.
Well, Cold Wars.
Yeah.
They're more ideology-based, but often it ends up being... basically you get the same amount of casualties in a full-on war. It's just, it's proxy war, so it's fine. We're only supporting different sides, so it's fine. I mean, there's still kind of a Cold War between a lot of...
Yeah,
places.
that's another one that there'd be a grey area with, though, because it's really, a Cold War is really just a competing of ideologies, isn't it? But, like, with underhand methods and spying and...
It's just ridiculous. It's like you can talk it out better than just having this fear-mongering and absolute division.
There was the whole movement in the 60s, wasn't there? That was really against the whole Vietnam War thing, and the hippies all kind of rose up with the flower power. But
oh yeah, America still has the draft, I believe. I don't know if it does actually. It might,
especially in
still have the
Chicago.
The Windy City?
Yeah, well done.
Okay. I vaguely know that. Does America still have the draft? Actually, I'll look it up because I have a computer in front of me for a reason.
Yeah, we haven't used it yet, have we?
Does America have the draft?
Do you know the autocompletes that come up make me laugh?
Oh, apparently it doesn't have the draft.
Federal law still requires men ages 18 to 25 to register for a draft that does not exist. There are few exemptions and no second chances.
Right.
That makes sense then.
Maybe the draft would come into effect if there was a more threatening war to America. Yeah.
Have you seen Platoon?
No.
You should watch that, it's good.
So I don't like how America just sort of, and Britain too, to be honest, just sort of go into a country and say, oh, well, now this government's a thing, and then leave it, and then it collapses and they just don't give a shit. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was... I think it was Afghanistan. It might be. No, I think it was
Are
Afghanistan.
we still in there? Or are America still in there?
I think there are still troops there, but not necessarily properly fighting.
They pulled out of Iraq, didn't they?
They've pulled out like loads of times. They keep pulling out and pushing back in. They're so indecisive.
They're effectively shagging Iraq.
Pretty much. They've fucked Iraq. But there was like this road loop that was meant to be completed, but it kept getting taken over by Taliban forces, and now pretty much, I think I saw in a Vox video, the Taliban is...
Somebody should have told them there are more effective
again.
forms of contraception than pulling out.
Mm-hmm.
What would the bastard child of America and Iraq be?
Israel.
Way to upset people.
Don't you cut that out. Shit.
No, I'm not cutting that out.
I can never be a politician now. I don't mean that.
Yeah, that soundbite won't be included. Well, it will in our video, but the people that
Great.
David Cameron fucked a pig, and he's still got to be Prime Minister. So
allegedly.
Oh yeah, sorry. So they say.
Mm-hmm. Watch out, Peppa Pig.
Wink, wink.
Mm-hmm. But I just see a lot of war as just like, it's not fought for the benefit of people. Unless it's a revolution, it rarely is. And even in the case of revolutions, once it's gotten past its sort of getting rid of the tyrannical government, sometimes it can go a bit too far, like the French Revolution did, and just end up cutting off middle class people's heads. Which for some I'm not against.
Anyone in particular?
Not against. Remember that.
So
they ended up just cutting off a bunch of people's heads that didn't actually oppress them in the end.
Yeah, no, I would like to go back to, actually. You could, because you're obviously very much against the concept of war, but you earlier, did you not say that you would be in favour of revolution?
In extreme circumstances, yes.
Right. So there are exceptions then when violent
I'm
fighting
not
is
completely pacifist. I understand that sometimes it is necessary. Because at that point, the damage done by the tyrannical government that you're likely under is worse than that would be.
So does that mean that what it comes down to is who's making the decision about when it's necessary?
People aren't being culled by the British government, so at that point...
Anymore?
Anymore. People aren't being mass killed by the British government, so at this point it's not necessary for a revolution to occur. If it ever does become that, which I really hope it doesn't, then a revolution may be necessary. But I think once it gets to the point where...
How do you think it would happen?
The government is doing more damage than the revolution would.
How do you think it could
The revolution
happen
is
in Britain?
wanted. Well, the rise of right-wing politics is quite worrying to me.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm not asking
no-
why you think it might happen. I'm asking how you think it could happen. Like, what form would it take? Would you get crowds of protesters on the streets, basically, that would boil over into an ongoing situation of...
What, a revolution?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would
you
probably
do
end up
get
being
demonstrations and protests that can turn into riots occasionally, but I suppose it would be a case of that turning into a more prolonged state of...
Yeah, if the government didn't back down there and understand their mistakes
and started sending military or police in
and shot down crowds of protesters, which they didn't do in the London riots, they hosed them down. As a couple might have been shot. The original guy that was started over was shot.
Yeah, I remember that.
2011?
Yeah, I can't remember the exact year.
I can't because I was... How old would I have been? 8.
Yeah, because there was a thing before that. There's an electrician that got chased down and shot on the tube, wasn't there? Because they thought he had.
Yeah.
I think he was Mexican, maybe.
But there is just sort of that sort of fear environment around people that aren't really that scary because people are racist.
But this sort of thing seems to happen a lot more in America and not be kind of dealt with.
I'm trying to think of why that might be.
I mean, they're more of a gun culture, aren't they? People getting shot isn't as much of a big thing there. Obviously, it's not good, but
here most police don't have guns.
It's not an accepted state of affairs, but it does seem to be more the norm that everybody seems to.
I think I saw one thing. I don't have a
acknowledged that there is racism.
I don't have a source for this, but 1 year, fairly recently, the police fired guns 7 times. This wasn't at people necessarily. This was just in general. The police fired guns 7 times
in the whole year in the whole country.
In the whole country, because they're just not necessary.
Yeah,
I found it quite interesting. In Toronto, there was a truck that drove into. I think it was a truck. It might have been a van that drove into a crowd of people, and the American media were really confused. Oh, how did you stop it without guns? You know, an actual effective police force that doesn't need to kill everyone.
How would a gun have stopped it anyway?
Exactly. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then people would argue, you know, oh, well, you don't ban knives. It's like...
But you can't slice a loaf of bread with a gun.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, fuck you, bread. I want to try that on this channel.
I'm getting a gun in for you.
If you own. No, that would cause problems.
Yeah,
because then you'd just be eating
more than your idea of
eating bullet shells.
More than your idea of having drugs in the on the show.
When I have lost track of the bad things I've said.
There have been for you. Although technically, actually, the first Breaking Bollocks we did because we were drinking beer.
That's not a crime because it's a private residence.
No, but it's still a drug.
Yeah, but so's ibuprofen.
Yeah.
And antibiotics, but you took that earlier and you just advocated it, saying, "Oh, I just took antibiotics." Well, earlier in the episode.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
So you oh yeah, technically.
I'm not making any valid point. I'm just saying. Anyway, war.
Illegal. On the conscription thingy, do you think, not necessarily for the military, but should there be a sort of form of conscription for national service? Sort of like paving roads or what other sort of stuff would be useful?
That seems
building a hospital,
that seems a little too far left for me.
It's more authoritarian, to be honest. But.
Yeah, because it's essentially the same thing as what do you call it? What is it when people have to do that sort of thing instead of going to prison?
Community service.
Community service, yeah. So you can't on the one hand use it as a punishment.
I think maybe...
although it may well be that it's being used as rehabilitation.
Not as sort of like a mandatory for everyone thing, or mandatory for anything, really. Just a sort of maybe an initiative for employment to just try and get people...
Well, you do get volunteer organisations, don't you?
Yeah, but meaning that they would get paid by the government to do this, but also helps with employment. It wouldn't be mandatory, but it would just be for people that...
I'm not sure what the situation is if you're on unemployment benefits. There
are a lot of strings attached to that.
Yeah, but you can. I think you can do some volunteer work and still be on unemployment benefits, but only for a certain amount of time.
Because you're not being in some organisations you get paid.
Well, the reason behind it, I think, is that it counts as work experience, which will enhance your chance of getting a job.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
So in that sense, I mean, it should, yeah, maybe it should be on offer, but it kind of is. You know, you can volunteer to do stuff.
I just
Can you just to go off on a tangent? Can you know more about it? Something we didn't follow through on. We were talking about Hamilton last week, and I said that you know a lot more about what you informed me was the Revolutionary War. Can you explain to me a little bit more about that? What happened? Because we didn't end that little part of the discussion.
Okay, I shall go from, I believe it was the 1600s that British force, well, French got there first, but British forces landed somewhere around Massachusetts, I think. I don't know this. They went on a huge expedition and eventually Britain claimed it as territory. 50 odd years later, I don't know. I'm not going to use like proper timescales. Later,
just a rough plot.
There were admittedly unfair restrictions placed on these. British still made laws for these. They couldn't vote despite having a fairly large population.
These what?
For the government of the UK. So at that point, it did have a parliament, although most people couldn't vote. So it was kind of
what
like
did?
Britain.
Britain had a parliament.
Yeah, Britain owned parts of America, though.
Right. Okay. So Britain were making the laws for certain parts of America, basically, what is now America.
Well,
they claimed territory.
The colonies at the time, because
colonies.
Parts of America were owned by the French, parts were owned by the Spanish. And basically, taxes that were fairly unfair were being put on them because they didn't vote.
Wow,
they couldn't.
That would have been a very it would have been a very different world if France had kind of won that war for territory, if you like. And America, America has ended up being French,
and they were allied with America.
Yeah.
And eventually, a revolutionary movement rose up. And although most of the colonies actually apparently completely supported the British government, because most of them were revolting.
The people that were revolting were the people who had moved there to colonise the place where they.
Well, most were immigrants unless they were Native Americans.
Yeah,
and
but they basically wanted to set up their own colony, kind of with its own rules and laws.
They wanted to found a nation.
Yeah, and the British were.
They wanted to be able to have
control
of their own laws.
We say what happens here,
and this probably wouldn't have succeeded if the French didn't get involved. And France and England, well, France and Britain, have a long-standing rivalry. They've had 200 years wars, both of which didn't actually last 100 years. But, so France wanted to get at Britain by supporting the American Revolution. And eventually, the Americans, in 1776, they declared independence and the war officially started. After about a decade, they actually became its own thing.
Right.
Properly.
And so what marked that? You say they declared independence, and then about a decade later, what marked it a decade later, the actual acceptance of it as a nation? Then,
well, there was a big battle, I believe the Battle of Yorktown, and the British basically was like, oh, fuck it, we give up.
Right.
Also, it's like,
so it was basically British.
The king at the time was going mad.
Yeah, I suppose that doesn't help.
And he might have actually gone mad after George III, yes.
Yeah.
So after France helped them, they also had a revolution because they couldn't afford to feed their people. They spent a bunch of money helping America and forgot about their own citizens.
So, and was the Civil War later?
The Civil War was much later.
And that was between Confederates, is it?
Confederates, which composed the... Basically, it's largely based around slavery. There are other issues, but the main issue was slavery. The Union, which at the time controlled the government, were moving towards abolishing slavery.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the southern states heavily relied on slaves for their industry. And
so it was a kind of north-south.
Their economy might have struggled a lot if they had to actually pay these workers. So yeah, the North and South fought, and eventually the Union won, which is why there's not slavery in America right now. There's still a lot of bitterness today. Well, I say a lot, it's probably a very vocal minority. But at the time after that, a fair amount of the South were very pissed off at this.
Yeah.
To the extent that ex-Confederate soldiers dressed up as ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers. This is why you have the KKK and those.
I was just going to say, that
ghost
sounds like
things.
KKK, yeah.
Yeah. And they got very popular.
Yeah.
Because people were still had those feelings. It's not like you have a civil war and magically all those feelings just go away. They gradually fade out. But yeah, so they had a lot of power still in America, despite slavery being abolished. Those are two separate events, though.
Yeah.
And most of the founders that actually wrote the Declaration of Independence still had slaves, although some of them said, "Oh, we don't support it, but we still have them."
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So anyway, we're going to be needing to wind up soon, but before we do, what do you think the prospects are? Sounds like the wrong way to put it, but do you think there is a possibility that there will be a third world war?
Yes, very much.
And what the definition of a world war is where countries are involved in each continent, isn't it? There are countries from every continent on the planet that are involved in it.
Well, no, because then Antarctica.
Well, yeah, apart from them.
They don't count. I think we're probably pretty close to that.
Do you?
Brazil's a rising power.
We thought that in the 1980s, though.
Yeah, but that was cold, so it was like lots of different. It was loads of different little wars, mostly in Asia. One in Cuba. Actually, a fair amount in South America, to be honest. Loads of little wars, but because it wasn't one big joined up thing, it wasn't considered.
See, the First and the Second World War, I wonder if they were known as world wars while they were actually going on.
Well, the First World War wasn't. So it's a Great War.
Mrs. Orbiter shaking her head. Because I was just thinking, obviously, the 100 Years' War, well, it wasn't 100 years. They didn't call it the 100 Years' War at the time. So, historically, might it be that people could look back at our time and call it a world war in the future? War on terrorism thing.
They started calling the Second World War World War II before it actually started in like a few journals.
But then when it did start, were they like,
I think
okay, it started now.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what do you think, if there was a third world war, what do you think the outcome would be?
Well, it would depend who the belligerents were.
Right. Well, what is a world war? You tend to get different sides, and then people take allies.
I think it would start with Saudi Arabia and Iran coming out of Cold War and going into full-on conflict.
Right.
Does
Saudi Arabia have nuclear weapons?
No.
No.
Iran was suspected to, but they don't have any known nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I believe there are 9 nuclear powers if you include North Korea, although their facilities have pretty much collapsed, which is why the peace has probably happened. That being Britain, America, France, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. What?
India and Pakistan having...
They are bitter.
Yeah.
India is actually quite powerful.
Yeah. But they've not always been on friendly terms, have they? India and Pakistan. And they're right
And
next
it's
door to each other.
suspected that Pakistani scientists sold the ability, well, the sort of plans for nuclear weapons to the North Korean government. Mm-hmm. But on the briefly nuclear weapons, because we're slightly running over on recording, I fully oppose them. In any effort to disarm them, I would be happy, because the loss of millions of lives, despite the fact that a few people are making these decisions, is unacceptable.
What about nuclear power? Do you oppose that?
Nuclear power, no, because it's quite actually efficient.
Yeah, so it's a rules thing. It's not the technology in itself. I know it's slightly different, but it's
and there's so much somebody that we wouldn't have without that actual just general.
The problem
principle.
is it kind of goes back to that mother of invention thing, in that, and if any invention, any technological advancement, somebody somewhere will weaponize it if they can.
I saw a QI tweet saying, what's his face?
That's a strange thing to say.
No, Richard Feynman. I think it was Richard Feynman. It might have been a different one. Basically, the famous quote, "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." Who said that?
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer, that's it. Apparently he didn't actually say that after it, but he said, "Well, I guess that worked."
Yeah. I wish he'd said something like, "Should we have a cup of tea?" Which is a fitting way, I think, to...
And on that bombshell...
Oh, ha, ha.
I've been Firebolt.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Bollocks.
Whoa!
Episode 10.
Sorry.
Bye! Thanks for watching. We'd really appreciate if you support us on various things, obviously subscribing on YouTube, Twitch, following us on Twitter or Facebook. We have a Discord server that you can join and talk to us and other people, and a website where you can check out blog posts.
And obviously this isn't free for us to run, so if you'd like to support us financially, we have a Patreon page where you can donate monthly and get subscriber rewards. We also have a Stream Elements tipping page where you can make one-off donations. The links are all in the description.
Farewell.
See you next time.
Do you want to do a secret bit?
Is this it? Are we doing it now?
No.
We are.
No.
Yes, we are.
No.